So, one of the most important issues in our country right now is what to do with the minimum wage. Should we increase it or leave it the same? Liberals and Democrats tend to want to increase the minimum wage. As you can see in this Hill article, Senator Sanders and other Democrats want to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And other Democrats, they don't often go as far, like Barack Obama. He simply wanted the minimum wage to be $10.10 an hour. But Republicans, on the other hand, want the minimum wage to stay at $7.25 an hour. They don't want to raise it, decrease it, or really do anything with it. They want it to stay the same. Now, I think both parties are wrong on this issue, and I think the minimum wage should be eliminated because I think that the very existence of a minimum wage harms workers, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand why. So to understand why the minimum wage is bad, we should understand why it was created in the first place. If you ask anybody now why the minimum wage was created, they'll say, oh, it was to protect workers. It was to boost the wages of workers. But that simply wasn't the reason why the minimum wage exists. The reason why the minimum wage was created, it was created by the Progressive Party, and it was to weed out certain people from our society, in the labor force specifically. We're talking about blacks, other minorities, women, children. They basically wanted those people out of the workforce so that the white man would be the sole dominator in the labor force. So they decided to write wage laws that would increase the cost of hiring these individuals, and they called them minimum wage ordinances. So as you can see in this article by FEE, Foundation for Economic Education, there was a minimum wage ordinance in Massachusetts in 1912. And this specific law only pertained to women and children in the workforce. And did it help them? Did it boost their wages? Did it really do anything positive for these people? No, it simply reduced the employment among the targeted groups. And this wasn't seen as a failure. This was seen as something positive. This was seen as something that should be happening because those people don't deserve to be in the workforce. Only the white man should be. Now, fast forward decades later, you ask a liberal now, do you think the minimum wage should be increased? Do you think the minimum wage should be decreased? What do you think should happen? They'll often say, I think it should be increased. And why do they say they want to increase? Not because they say they hate blacks or they hate women. On the contrary, the platform of the Democratic Party is to protect those people. But they actually think that they are helping those types of people. They think that they are helping blacks and women's and other people who are less fortunate than them by increasing the minimum wage so they have more money. So is this the case? You know, this Progressive Party, that was, early 1900s. Maybe things have changed in the minimum wage, but unfortunately it hasn't. This is the NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research, and in 1982, Charles Brown and his associates created a study, and they called it the effective minimum wage on employment and unemployment. And they found that a 10% increase in the minimum wage would result in a 1 to 3% increase in unemployment. Now, to give you a reference on how bad it would be for us to have a $15 minimum wage, our current minimum wage is $7.25, so it would be effectively doubling it. So using some basic math, we can see that if the minimum wage was increased to $15 an hour, our employment would be cut by 5 to 15%. Now you might say, oh, well, that's just a theory, Economists, they're always talking about theory, but that's not how it works in real life. Well, that's simply not true. There are several countries that don't have a minimum wage. For example, Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, Denmark, and they have healthy wage rates. They don't have very poor and terrible wage rates. They have $20 per hour in Denmark, $16 to $20 in Norway and $25 an hour in Switzerland. And all of these countries have one thing in common: they don't have minimum wage laws. Now, you might say, oh, this has to do with trade unions. Oh, this has to do with employee organizations. This has to do with other things. It doesn't have to do with the minimum wage. And I would say that's incorrect. For example, let's take Switzerland. It has a $25 per hour base salary. The trade union density rate in Switzerland is one of the lowest in all of Europe, and it is continuing to decrease while wages are increased. And this is for the simple matter that pay isn't tied to government control. It isn't tied to government policy. It's tied to productivity. If you're producing $5 worth to a company and you expect to get paid at $15 an hour or even $7.25 an hour, you simply won't get hired because you would be creating a profit loss for the company. So if you produce less and expect to get paid more, you simply won't get hired in the first place. Your pay isn't going to magically increase. On the flip side, if you're producing $100 an hour and you're getting paid $1 an hour, then you can find employment in a different company. Because if you're producing $100 an hour and another company wants to hire you for, let's say, $50 an hour, then obviously you will choose to leave the company that is paying you $1 an hour and choose the one that is paying you $50 an hour. And to say that, oh, well, that won't happen, these countries are proof that it will happen. And finally, this isn't to say that poor people don't deserve a chance. One of the biggest stereotypes conservatives or people who believe in trickle-down economics possess, it's that we don't care about the poor, big middle finger to the poor. That's how people portray us, but that's simply not true. There are multiple ways that you could help the poor without negatively affecting the market as much as a minimum wage would do. For example, the EITC, which is the Expanded Income Tax Credit, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a tax credit for those who are working. So you get money for actually working, and it doesn't affect employers at all because it's not the employers who are paying you that tax credit, it's the government. And as you can see, expansions in the EITC, according to this study by the AEI, expansions in the EITC increase employment. They don't decrease employment. So the EITC, other than having effects on deficits, it wouldn't have a negative effect on employment. It would actually have a positive effect on employment. So that's basically why the minimum wage should be reduced to $0.00. I hope I've made sense in these few minutes. Thank you very much for your time.